The moment Constance told me to pay her $1,500 a month to live in my own apartment, I didn't argue. I smiled. I thanked her for being so clear about her expectations. And then I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Every word, every demand, every threat. Because I already knew exactly what I was going to do with it. My name is Raven. I'm 36 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant, which meant I understood something about paper trails that Constance was about to learn the hard way. This was March 2019, and it had been 7 months since Marcus and I had closed on the apartment in Portland. 3 bedrooms, restored hardwood floors, a kitchen that faced the eastern light, were $312,000. We'd saved for 6 years. Every dollar came from our own paychecks. Mine from the accounting firm, his from his engineering job. We had no family money involved, no co-signature, no shared ownership. Just our names on the deed, locked in a fireproof safe. But Constance had a different version of reality. She'd arrived on a Thursday in early March, unannounced, with her overnight bag and her opinions already unpacked before she crossed the threshold. She'd stayed for 3 days in the guest room, the one we'd furnished specifically for visiting family, and somewhere between the first night's dinner and the second morning's coffee, she'd decided that our apartment had somehow become communal family property. That's when the rent demand came. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Sunlight was streaming through the south-facing window, turning the whole room golden. Marcus was at work. It was just me and Constance, and she said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. You know, I think $1,500 a month is fair, for my share of the place. Since it's family property now, I remember the kettle was whistling behind her. I remember how cold my hands felt when I set down my coffee mug. I remember counting to 5 before I said anything at all. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Can you explain how an apartment that Marcus and I purchased together, with our own money for 6 years, became family property?" Constance shifted in her chair. She had this way of making herself smaller when she was about to say something she knew was unreasonable. Like if her physical size was diminished, her words would be too. "Because families should share. Your father put money toward Marcus's college. You benefited from that education. So now I deserve a stake." My father, who had passed away 11 years, 4 months, and 12 days earlier, who had indeed helped pay for Marcus's engineering degree back in 2006, as an act of generosity that had absolutely nothing to do with real estate ownership in 2019. "That's not how ownership works," I said. My voice was still calm, still even, still perfectly reasonable. "That's not how any of this works." But Constance had momentum now. She leaned forward. "Well, it's going to work that way, because I'm not leaving until we establish a fair rent payment. And if you won't agree to it, I'm going to have to tell Marcus that you're being unreasonable about your mother-in-law's housing needs." There it was. The threat. The manipulation tool. The thing that was supposed to make me bend. I didn't bend. I picked up my phone instead, and I texted Marcus. "Your mother wants me to pay her $1,500 a month for the privilege of living in our apartment, which she's decided is now family property. She's threatening to tell you I'm being unreasonable if I refuse. Are you at a place where you can call me?" He called me 43 seconds later. I put him on speaker. He listened to Constance repeat her demands, and then he said something I'll never forget. Said it with such quiet certainty that it changed the entire trajectory of what came next. "Mom, I'm going to be very clear. That's not how this works. But I want Raven to handle this however she sees fit. I trust her completely." Then he hung up. Constance's face went the color of old concrete. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Okay, I said. Let me make sure I understand exactly what you're asking. In writing. I want to get this all documented so there's no confusion later. If you're listening to this right now, and you know what it's like to have a family member try to gaslight you into surrendering something that's rightfully yours, type, "I know the feeling," in the comments. Because I read those, and I want you to know that you're not alone. What happened over the next 4 weeks was methodical and quiet. Every single communication from Constance was met with one response from me. "Can you send me that in writing?" When she called, I asked her to email. When she emailed, I printed the message, had it notarized, and filed it. When she made verbal demands at dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom and recorded the conversation on my phone using the memo app. 16 recordings total, between March 8th and April 2nd. I consulted with a family law attorney named Patricia Chen on March 15th. The initial consultation was $200. I paid in cash and took detailed notes about every word she said. Her advice was simple. Document everything. Then, when you're ready, send one letter that addresses every claim at once, in writing, with legal language. Make it clear that you have records of all previous communications. Then wait. I spent 87 hours compiling the documentation. 62 pages printed and organized by date. Every email, every recorded audio file transcribed, every notarized conversation. I created a spreadsheet tracking the timeline of Constance's claims, her specific dollar amounts, her threats, and her contradictions. I included the deed to the apartment. I included bank statements showing the down payment came exclusively from Marcus's and my accounts. I included a copy of our mortgage papers. By April 1st, the file was complete. 342 pieces of evidence, all cross-referenced. Marcus didn't know the full extent of what I was building. He knew I was documenting things, but he'd decided early on to trust that I would handle it. That decision, his absolute faith in me, turned out to be the steadiest ground I had. Because the next part required me to be completely alone. On April 2nd at 9:47 p.m., Constance called. I was sitting in the bedroom with the door closed. The house was quiet except for the sound of the clock on the nightstand ticking toward 10. "Raven," she said, and her voice had that sticky sweet quality it got when she was trying to manipulate. "I've been thinking about this apartment situation. I think $1,500 is actually too much. How about $800? That's more than fair for what I'm entitled to." I took a breath. "Constance, I'm going to send you something tomorrow morning. I want you to read it very carefully. It's going to contain every single communication you've made to me about this apartment, every claim you've made, every demand, organized by date with supporting documentation. And then I want you to understand that this conversation is officially over." Silence on the other end. Then, "What do you mean, over?" "I mean done. Finished. I'm not going to explain our legal rights to you again. Tomorrow you'll receive a letter from my attorney, and after that, all communication goes through her. Not through me, not through Marcus, through Patricia Chen. Do you understand?" "You're being absolutely insane," Constance said. "Marcus would never—" "Marcus already knows. He'll receive the same letter, and he's in complete agreement." That wasn't quite true when I hung up. Marcus knew I was going to send a letter. He didn't know that I had a 342-page file of documented evidence backing it up. But he was going to find out in 12 hours, along with his mother. The letter Patricia drafted was 14 pages. It outlined, in legal language that felt like ice water, every single claim Constance had made. It cited state law regarding property ownership. It referenced each piece of documentation in the file. It made clear that continued harassment regarding this matter would result in a cease and desist letter. And it ended with this sentence: "My client is not interested in negotiating ownership of property, that was purchased entirely with funds from her and her husband's personal accounts, and she will not be engaging in further discussion of this matter. I printed the letter at 6:15 a.m. on April 3rd. I had it hand-delivered to Constance's house by a courier at 8:47 a.m. I emailed it to Marcus at 8:50 a.m. I emailed it to Patricia's office at 8:52 a.m. By 9:15 a.m., the deed was secure, the paper trail was complete, and Constance had exactly 0 remaining ground to stand on. She called Marcus at 10:33 a.m. He didn't answer. She called again at 10:47 a.m. Still no answer. By 2 p.m., she'd sent 4 emails. By 6 p.m., she'd called me 9 times. I didn't pick up any of them. What happened next was the kind of cascade that only comes when someone realizes they've been completely outmaneuvered. Constance called her sister. Her sister called Marcus's father. His father called Marcus and asked why his wife was being sued. She wasn't being sued. She was being told, clearly and finally, that she had no legal claim to our apartment. Within 48 hours, the entire extended family had a version of this story, and most of them believed that I was being cruel and vindictive. That was the part that was hard. Not the confrontation. Not the documentation. Not the letter. The hard part was the days that followed, when I had to live with the knowledge that half of Marcus's family now thought I was a terrible person for protecting what was ours. But Marcus never wavered, not for a single second. He came home that evening and found me sitting on the back deck with the file beside me. He sat down without looking at the documentation. He just looked at me. "Thank you," he said, "for protecting us, for handling this, for being so methodical that she has no ground left to stand on." I didn't expect that. I expected him to worry about his relationship with his mother, to ask if we could find middle ground. Instead, he understood something that I'd learned years ago. Sometimes protecting your own peace requires being completely immovable. Constance didn't speak to us for 9 months after that. She didn't call. She didn't email. She didn't show up at the door. The silence was heavy and absolute, and it was also exactly what we needed. When she finally reached out, in January 2020, it wasn't an apology. She called Marcus and said she'd been thinking about visiting sometime soon. Marcus told her that would be fine, but that any visit would need to come with an understanding. There would be no further discussion of rent, property ownership, or any financial arrangement. There would be respect for our home and our boundaries. If she couldn't agree to those terms, the visit wouldn't happen. She agreed. She came for 4 days in February. We were polite. We were cordial. We were not warm. The kitchen felt different with her in it, smaller somehow, even though nothing had physically changed. But everything had changed. Because now I existed in her world as someone she could not manipulate, as someone with a paper trail longer than her memory, as someone who smiled calmly while documenting everything. And that was enough. The apartment is still ours. All 3 bedrooms, all those hardwood floors, every square inch purchased with our own work and our own money. The deed is still in the safe. The file with 342 pieces of evidence is still on an encrypted drive that I update quarterly, just in case. I don't know if Constance thinks about that letter anymore. I don't know if she feels any regret about the 9 months of silence, or the way her son chose his wife's protection over his mother's claim to ownership. What I do know is this: sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply document the truth, present it with absolute calm, and then refuse to negotiate with someone who has already shown you who they are. If you're listening to this right now and you're in a situation where someone is trying to take what's yours, whether it's money, property, dignity, or peace, I need you to hear this. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be angry. You can be quiet, methodical, and completely immovable. You can build your case in silence. You can present it with a smile. and you can walk away knowing that the truth doesn't require your permission to be true. Thank you for being here all the way to the end. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments what family boundary you wish you'd set sooner. If you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. And if you're new here, subscribe. Another story is waiting. I'm Raven, and I'll see you very soon.